Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Derek Marshall.
I'm your co-host, Rich Gear here as well, and happy to have you, Derek.
Thank you, Rich.
It's kind of new, but I'm kind of excited to see you on here. He's got a program laid out, folks. I tell you what, enough for 2 shows.
Yeah. Well, we're going to try to get through this in one show. Basically,
what do you want to title the show?
We're going to title the show "Elements of the Bible."
All right, pretty straightforward. That sounds good.
And that can be taken a couple different ways. You could say we could talk about elements of the Bible, but we're talking actual periodic table of the elements, type of elements for this show. And the Bible actually mentions by name several of the elements and other materials that are brought out in the context of their properties. Okay. And God brings the Bible and the elements alive by talking about each of these metals and by what their personalities are. And
in the scripture, I've been obviously fascinated over the years with what we call biblical typology, and a lot of these, the first 3 you're going to mention here, which are gold and silver and copper, especially gold and silver. And when you get into iron, these have typological meanings as well as what you're going to bring it to us. Okay, let's start with gold.
Let's go. Gold's a pretty easy one. All right. Gold is a very deep. So there's a lot to the typology, as Rich said, about gold. We're going to stick to some of the high points. For example, King Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 2 had a head of gold, and he was the king. So gold represents deity or kingship, and God is very, very concerned about gold. And in fact, the streets are paved with gold in heaven.
It's the only element that doesn't tarnish or rust.
Yeah.
Okay, when you said deity, that is a typological thing. I'm going to throw a little monkey wrench just for a second, because the Ark of the Covenant is interesting because it's acacia wood encased in gold. And it's symbolized, because wood is not one of our elements we're going to talk about, but wood is really a symbol throughout Scripture of humanity. And gold, symbol of deity, it's a symbol of Christ himself.
You could also say
humanity
that
wrapped in divinity.
There's a whole. You brought in some really good stuff there. The wood is actually. Boy, we're going to go with this.
This is what I do to Doug all the time.
Christ was hung on a tree, so it's wood. Mm-hmm. He covers our sins.
Yep.
He covers us. That's what the function of our salvation is, the covering of our sins. Wood has a lot of significance in the Bible.
Absolutely does, yes.
And that's, boy, you got me excited. I got the goosebumps over that one. I really like the. Plus, the Ark of the Covenant is actually a type of the temple. It's got the 3 sections, and there's a lot to that.
Notice what was in it.
Fibonacci ratio of measurements.
Oh, we're getting into that. Okay.
You wanted to go there.
Yeah. Well, I also like the Ark of the Covenant because what's inside of it is Aaron's rod that budded, so death from life. Or life from death, sorry. Something that was dead becomes back to life. The law is in there, and basically all the elements in there. It's really a symbol of Christ himself. And the temple, of course, was made to talk about the heavenly temple, if you will, in a sense. So that all these typological things do happen. We started this with gold, folks, but we're going all over the place. But it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun.
It is. It's a very important piece.
Is there any other things with
you
gold?
You can't really. Not talk about gold without talking about the Ark of the Covenant. Gold, there's one point I want to bring out about gold. This is a lesson that I learned about it, that I saw in the Bible. Is in the Bible, God or someone like Solomon will receive gold. He'll get gold. Like he got, 666 talents of gold per year was his yearly income of gold from his various sources. But people may receive gold, but the gold is always taken away. In this case, in Solomon's case, King Shishak actually got all that gold when the temple was sacked.
He made a point that if it was taken from when they took the gold out of Egypt, all the gold jewels and all that kind of stuff, when they left, they got all the spoils of Egypt, but because they backslid, they never got to keep it. Right. Once you reject the things of God, He's given you the spoils of war, so to speak, the spoils of the devil. As long as you live the righteous way, you'll be able to hold on to that. But mankind being the way they are, He knows in advance you're never gonna. Even in the Old Testament, He says, if you do this, this, and this, you're gonna prosper. Things are gonna be great. But if you don't, then you're gonna go this. You're gonna be sold into slavery. And of course, He knew in advance that was all going to happen, and they did it all. Well, the same thing. It sounds like what you're talking about with the treasures.
Right.
With the
Well,
treasures.
this kind of leads into the next element. With the gold, for example, when the children of Israel left Egypt, they left with a lot of the gold and silver and the treasure that the Egyptians had. And the part of this lesson that I like is they didn't know the people that all these riches were heaped upon them to get out of here, get out of here, right? But they didn't know what it was for. Nobody knew what all this stuff was for. And a lot of people, if you obtain a bunch of stuff, automatically you feel like it's yours to covet, right? Oh, this is mine. This is my stuff, right? But all these materials, including silver, which is the next element we're going to talk about, were used to build the temple. The gold was used to build the ark. The silver was used in this case, to build the little sockets. The acacia wood was built together with the silver, so the sockets could, or the wooden planks that held the tent up, physically up. A lot of that was made of silver, so it would slide in really easily.
Silver is another one of those typologicals in the temple. You had the laver, the bronze laver, and then that's the next one where you get to, and then you had the silver. I'm trying to remember the silver sacrificial altar there, and then you had the gold, inside the temple. But the point of it is that's for the deities. But the silver, you got the one is like bronze is typological of sacrifice and offering, and silver is atonement.
Okay.
It always means atonement.
Yeah.
It always means atonement, and it's really powerful. The silver, and when they do the Levitical priesthood, for instance, they will blow silver trumpets on the first moon. But in the festival, the Levitical feast, the Feast of Trumpets, they blow the silver trumpets along with a shofar, a ram's horn. That's Jesus, and the atonement is right there.
That one.
So I'm just.
That's creation function stuff right there.
That's cool stuff.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But you said silver is used for atonement or cleansing.
Yeah.
Right? Did you know that silver has antibacterial properties?
Now that I read, and I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, that's why it was popular in the old days for silverware. And it's used in.
Didn't they mix it in tonics sometimes? Didn't they like grind it up or something? And now that I think about that, they would put little. I don't know whether that was good for you or not.
Well, that reminds me of the punishment. They ground up gold and made the children of Israel drink the.
Oh yeah.
Gold.
Yeah.
That's what that reminds me of. I don't know. They may or may not have done that.
Anyway, for medicinal things. Anyway, so.
But silver also has. Really, one of the most familiar passages where silver is portrayed is the 30 pieces of silver that Judas
and it purchased the Lamb of God.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that, and of course, the treasure he throws into the priesthood, and they say this is blood money, so. We bought out the potter's field,
Well, I thought that was always interesting. That I don't know. This is Derek Marshall's take on this, but Christ, when he was crucified, he bled, and he, in fact, when he was pierced, blood and water issued from his side.
Yes,
and imagine a lot of that made it to the ground.
Yeah.
So, is there some sort of thing where that blood was to occupy the ground needed to be purchased also, so Christ was not bleeding someplace where it would have been spiritually illegal.
I don't know, but Christ does say
he purchased or was purchased for him the field of blood. So that blood that he bled was legally okay to be in the ground, because the earth doesn't receive blood easily. We know that from Abel when he slew Cain.
Okay.
Right, so that's a big deal when people bleed, as far as the earth is concerned.
It is a big deal.
That's a Derekism right there. Hopefully that's just something in the Bible that is a curiosity.
Well, it is the blood and water and on the ground, because the ground was cursed.
But we're going to see,
and that was an alleviation of the curse.
Here's one that you may not. The average silver gold price ratio is usually between 1 to 50 to 1 to 60. So you can tell if silver is underpriced or undervalued.
And it's a dollar
ratio to gold.
Okay.
Gold is usually 50 to 60 times more expensive than silver.
Okay. All right.
That's a key there.
All right. I didn't know that.
The next one here is copper. which we know copper as being an excellent conductor of electricity. It also
Right.
has antibacterial properties. But what's nice about copper is that you can find it in its native, it's found in its native state, meaning pure copper. You can just pick it up off the ground. At least they used to.
Oh yeah, at the museum I worked at,
It's-
big float copper, just laying, just huge. They try to figure out how many pennies. Well, no pennies are made out of copper anymore, but when they used to be made out of copper, how many pennies you get out of this piece of float copper?
8,182.
And Doug, remember that. That's our voice from the background.
That's the big guy. He's
Yeah.
still, Doug Sharp is still the big guy. He's
Yeah.
back there. But we're going to talk about, now, of course, gold, silver, and copper, those are elements. Those are actual elements. Some of the other materials that we're going to talk about are alloys of copper. And it's very interesting to see that the widow's mite, they think, was copper. Widow's mites. If you can actually
And
buy
yeah, because
widow's
you
mites.
can buy those mites. Yeah, I think I have one somewhere. You know.
Yeah, those are for sale. I wouldn't mind having a widow's mite either, because copper is a soft metal, but it's not that soft.
Right.
So it was good enough to be able, it was hard enough where it would hold the imprint and it could be used for the cheap money.
Well,
like
yeah,
small money.
Native Americans would pound copper cold, and they could pound it cold into shapes like awls, and because that's how they made a lot of their clothing and stuff like that. What's interesting about copper, you talk about in the Bible, they talk about when we talk about brass and bronze. Okay, because it's an it's both. It's used in both of those, and I was always confused about that when
Right.
growing up, because they look very similar.
Yeah.
They shine up. They look kind of golden, but you said I was reading one thing, a little greenish cast to it as opposed to a
Right. Reddish
a reddish,
or
yeah, or a
pinkish.
pinkish with
Gold is like, you have gold, brass, and bronze. Gold
Yeah.
has kind of a little bit of a reddish tint to it, whereas brass has the brassy green color.
Okay,
And then the bronze is kind of like kind of more of a muddy color, I think.
is that what I
But,
guess?
but
They
I
both
think
shine up pretty good.
something that I think Rich was getting at, which is very true, is you'll see the word copper in the KJV, King James Version of the Bible. You'll see it once, right? And then
Right.
you'll see instances of brass, things made of brass. And then you'll see things made of bronze.
Yeah.
Now, those three, basically the same Hebrew word is used for those
All three of them,
all
yeah.
three. So I think they were differentiated between based upon the context of the writing when the translators made it. But for the most part, those three are basically the same. But what I have found is if you keep track of the atomic number of each of those, for example, zinc is atomic number 30,
Okay.
and copper is atomic number 29. So you have brass has a 30 and a 29 complement to it.
Okay.
Now there's a lot of 30s in the Bible.
Okay.
How many 30s of the Bible?
Well, we talked about one of the 30 pieces of silver.
30 pieces of silver.
Okay, we talked about that one. You know.
And then you have the age of Christ when he began his ministry.
Yep.
I think John the Baptist too, if I remember right. Maybe.
Yep. He was about 30, and actually was probably in modern when he died was probably 30 A.D. Okay, just for I don't know whether that means anything or not, but
I think there's other ones that I can't think of off the top of my head, but another one is the height of the ark is 30 cubits.
30 cubits. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And the width of the ark was 50 cubits, which is one of our upcoming topics of tin. We're going to talk about tin.
Okay. Oh, 10?
So my point is, these alloys, they're components that make up the alloy. For example, bronze, the simplistic bronze is copper and tin. So you have a 29 and you have a 50.
Okay.
If you add those together, you get 79, which is the atomic number of gold. It's kind of like a poor man's gold. But if
Okay.
you put the two together, you don't get gold, obviously.
No, you don't. No.
So that's an interesting thing. Things that are made of bronze are made of the same, it's not the same atomic number, but if you add the two atomic numbers of the constituency,
What's interesting though
you'll get 79.
is that the more valuable, like gold is the most valuable, it's softer, and silver is harder, but it's still, and each one gets a little bit stronger in one sense,
Right.
but they're not as valuable.
The further, you
Yeah,
get
isn't
down.
that? I've always wondered I said, Lord, what does that mean? You know, I'm not quite sure about that, because especially when I get into the statue in Daniel chapter 2.
Right.
You know, and you got the head of gold, which is representing Nebuchadnezzar. Then you got the arms of silver and top part of the torso, not really the chest. And that's silver, which is Medo-Persia. And then you have the torso and top of the legs, which is brass or bronze. That's like, each one is stronger. And, you know, that's Greece, okay? And then you get into the iron legs, you know, the 10 toes. And, of course, it's interesting because the iron is stronger yet,
Yeah.
but it's even less valuable. But we use it for everything. So we're not
Right,
to
so
the
we're
iron.
gonna
We're
get
not
into
we're not
iron
to the
here.
iron yet. But then you get into clay, which you mentioned something earlier.
Yeah,
and I'm fascinated
we'll talk
about that because
about-
it goes iron mixed with clay in the
Yep.
statue. So anyway,
And they're listed in periodic table order too, which they had, the authors of the Bible had no way of knowing that these elements had any sort of numerical significance, but they are listed in periodic table order, which, that was a couple shows ago we talked about
we
that.
did talk about that. Yeah, okay.
But let's do some talking about iron here. Iron is rarely found in its pure elemental form. It's
Right.
usually found as oxides because it rusts so easily.
Right.
It's found in combinations, very reactive metal. It's found in combinations with other materials. You know, we have to mine it, we have to smelt it, we have to do all sorts of stuff to it to get it to be in a pure form.
And I want to disabuse for those, we oftentimes talk about Bronze Age and Iron Age. I don't really accept that term. I mean, I accept the terminology, people use it. But I think it's more about what was available as opposed to what age it was. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's some place, I mean, because we talked in the earliest chapters of Genesis, it talks about, was it Tubal-Cain? I think it was Tubal-Cain who made implements of brass and iron. So before the flood, they were making things out of brass and iron. And I think that a lot of maybe used, they smelted brass or bronze, if you will, from zinc and copper, right?
Well, those have lower melting points.
That's what I'm saying.
Iron is a very,
Yeah.
it takes
Well,
a certain amount of
we know-
technology to get the heat up, to get the iron together, and then to get the iron in a fashion that it's useful. It takes a little bit more skill.
And I don't think the Egyptians were out, as advanced as they are. Some of the stuff is not. Maybe they did it for strength. I don't know. But oftentimes, their gold was not totally pure. Gold and silver are found together a lot, and they called it electrum. And that's kind of a combination in Egypt. A lot of it's a mixture of gold and silver. So you wonder, and then later, you know, maybe it was a little bit later that they got more popular with iron because it was stronger, and they could
Right.
wipe out the black. But I always think of it almost as much of not saying environmental, but a location, what was available, what minerals were available. That is what they used in a lot of these civilizations. Another thing that's interesting, I don't know about this with iron, but I suspect it is true, the same thing. Gold and silver and copper all have their own unique signatures depending on where they're mined.
You're going to bring that up.
Yeah, because depending on where they're mined, you mine gold in Arizona, you mine or you in Asia, we mine gold or copper. Doug and I went up. We were up the Upper Peninsula, and we talked to a guy. And there's copper that's been mined. Michigan's very famous for its copper mines up there, and they've documented. And of course, I mean, I'm talking off the top of my head, so I don't have the things right in front of me. And this is controversial, so maybe I shouldn't say like this is a fact. But it seemed the guy was pretty strongly opinionated that it was fact. And I've read several places where they found Michigan signature copper in Phoenician artifacts in the ancient world. Okay, in other words, people had gotten over here very earlier because people were very confused at how you could have people in the New World at one time. They called them antipodes or something. Something like that. Anyway, they were like, where there were other created beings.
Yeah.
And the scripture is very clear. See, we're going far afield, but that's what I do.
Well, not really,
You know.
because I'm ready to bring it home.
Oh, you are ready to bring it home?
Yeah.
Good. I like
because
that. Okay.
How that's done is, if you have a sample of gold or a sample of silver, that's not pure one particular isotope of gold
Correct.
or silver.
Yeah. Okay.
You're going to have certain numbers of other isotopes, and those are going to be different depending on where those.
Is that what the signature is all about?
Yes, that's
okay.
how you can get the signatures of
Okay.
different mixtures of isotopes within a particular sample.
Okay.
And that's pretty much known. There's a baseline. It's pretty much known in the crust of the earth what the average is, and then the instrumentation is so sensitive that you can really hone in on
Pretty
where
amazing.
different places.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating that people were here in the New World, what we would consider very close after the flood. They were migrating over here. You know, they were getting here from one way or the other, whether it's the Bering Strait land bridge or whether it's they took boats and went from the other side. I don't know, but I mean, there's pretty strong familial type traits when you see the Mayans and the Mongols. They're very, very similar, and when I was down there with a friend of mine, they all said, "No, no, yeah, we're descended from the Mongols." You know, the Gobi Desert, you know, and the traits are very similar. But so that metal, the gold or the copper that's used in bronze, could have been mined over here at some point and brought over there or whatever. It's pretty fascinating study as far as that goes. But anyway.
You're right about the iron, though. The reason why iron is used is it's obviously it's very strong. It's very plentiful because if you want to talk about the Earth as a globe, it's the most common metal because we have a core, iron core Earth, right?
Okay, yeah.
But it's, I think it's fourth or something like that as far as the abundance in the crust of the Earth.
Yes.
So it's very abundant.
It's huge,
Now, biblical significance of iron. We got some very scary images of iron,
Yes,
iron
we do.
teeth, beasts with iron teeth. God, Christ is going to rule with a rod of iron. So there's a very definite connection between iron and Christ. Because he's going to rule with that rod of iron.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you see the kingdoms, again in Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, the beast has brass fingers, but it's got iron teeth, you know, and so, and then the legs of iron, and of course the strength of, which we believe is the Roman Empire, those two legs, the two sides, the eastern and western half Roman, and it mixes in with the barbarians that become the 10 toes and the feet because they were like weaker, and it weakened the empire in a lot of respect. It actually strengthened it to one thing, but it weakened it as far as its purity, its pure form. It was diluted down.
There's a lot of combinations of iron and brass. A lot of that. There's more than one. There's several times when they're mentioned together like that. And once again, if you take the elemental, the atomic numbers of each of those, and you know which is 26 and 30. If you watch the show, the Daniel image that we were talking about, it's actually a periodic table. I think it was 2 shows ago or 3 shows ago.
Yeah, something like
periodic table in the elements that you can get from that. But I was going to add that part to the discussion. But
okay,
those two elements show up a lot together. Now we're going to talk about zinc. Now zinc isn't mentioned in the Bible
directly,
but zinc is part of an alloy, and I think it's important. I think it was hidden in there for us to discover its properties. And I view zinc as it doesn't mention zinc by name, but there was a lot of archaeological discoveries in Israel with zinc. Zinc promotes the human body's defense system. But there's one very special thing that I learned about zinc, is it's very, very important in fetal development, or in when the woman is pregnant, when the fetus or the zygote is being, and actually there is an announcement of life. When the sperm fertilizes the egg, there's what's called a zinc explosion.
Everything's in zinc, right?
Yep. And that's another 30, yes.
We synchronize our. Okay, I couldn't resist it.
When everything is in zinc, you get a zinc explosion, and it's the announcement of life, because zinc is atomic number 30. It's another 30 in the Bible that God wanted us to discover.
Obviously, with this last year or so, with all this COVID stuff, and zinc has been like a big factor right now. People are talking about that a lot as far as helping the immune system and all that kind of stuff. So
I also like to talk about zinc as being a humble material. It's behind the scenes. It provides a very important function with copper to stiffen it up. So if you put the two together, it disrupts the cuticle or the structure of copper enough where it becomes harder, and it can become bronze, which it could be actually used as a weapon. It's starting to get into that level of hardness. But that's why I like, I call it being alloyed with Christ.
Oh boy, I thought I was good with puns. Good job, Derek. I like that, man. That was awesome. Yep.
So I think
Now-
we talked about bronze and brass. Bronze is a lot of modern or metals are made of bronze. You got the bronze medal. A lot of
Yeah.
military medals are made of bronze. You have the story of when as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so shall the Son of Man be lifted up as a bronze serpent.
Yep.
So there's similarities there. There's a lot of significance, especially if you're aware of the atomic number of all these elements. Here's one of my favorite ones here is tin. Now tin, once again, you're not going to find tin necessarily in the Bible, but I consider tin as a disruptor material.
Oh.
It's a disruptor because, first of all, if you alloy it with copper, once again, you get brass. So you get a material that's a little harder than both tin and or copper.
Okay.
But also tin very much disrupted our society the way we used to can food using glass bottles. And when we invented the tin can, it kind of disrupted society.
Well, wasn't that
You know,
because they put lead to make the seams and people got
Right.
they would get scurvy and
Right. Well, they don't really use tin for tin cans anymore. But
not
at the time,
anymore,
it
but
was-
it was the lead I think that got that on the seams of the tin. The tin I don't know was tin toxic itself, but I know the lead got into the food and it got into their bloodstream because there was a lot of things about that. But
the atomic number of tin is 50. So
Okay.
that's another important number in the Bible. There's a lot of 50s in the Bible. One is the width of the ark was 50
well, also
cubits.
the year of Jubilee,
It's Jubilee also.
freedom.
Yes.
Yep. You disrupt all your status quo there.
See, I think we're getting pretty close here. We got a couple minutes.
Now, I wanted to get into this clay.
You want to get
because
into the clay?
The
Okay,
clay,
let's
the
do some
aluminum,
clay.
silicon, and magnesium.
Right,
All
yeah.
right.
So that's really important because the foot of the beast, or the foot of the image that's in Daniel 2, is clay.
Right.
But clay is actually made up of 3 different materials, and if you take a peek at the show we did about 3 or 4 shows ago, we talk about the foot, or the 2 feet, the 2 human feet
Yep, with 10 toes,
are
yep.
actually a perfect periodic table model. Just like
Oh,
there's
that's
2
right. I
feet-
remember that. Yep,
2
yep.
feet of the image of Nebuchadnezzar, and where the elements are placed from element 1 to element 18 or 19 if you want to count the
Yep.
heel. Clay is very well placed right there on the feet, just like clay
Okay.
feet. So that prophecy is true in a lot of different ways. And then here's a quick one here. This one here is lead. Now you will find lead in the Bible. Lead is a very vibrant prophetic material, and if you read Zechariah 5, there is a ephah, which we used to carry mixed grain. It's a
Oh, sure,
measuring-
yeah,
it's a-
no, yep.
it's a volumetric container that used to carry grain or what have you in it, and there was a prophecy in Zechariah 5 of a woman being inside this ephah, right, sealed with a lid made of lead.
That's a
Then if
disruptor.
you take the prophecy before that of a flying roll, which was 10 cubits wide and 20 cubits long, those 2 prophecies together do something very special.
And we're going to talk about that next time because we're getting ready to.
Yeah, we're
we got
getting
to check.
ready to
We got
wrap
to
up.
check out now. I got to
The
wrap
big
it
guys
up.
wants to wrap it up. So thank you for watching, and see you soon on Revolution with Evolution.
Bye now.